For countless individuals, the story is the same. You put in weeks of effort, you yield a triumphant number on the scale, and once you stop and take a breath and relax, the weight starts creeping back up with vengeance. This is the case, unfortunately, for about 80% of people that try to lose weight, which sparks the question, is it really a collective failure of character, or is there something deeper going on, a powerful biological system which actively works against your best intentions? This is why today we're going to be discussing the hormonal changes in your hunger and appetite hormones that occur once you try to lose weight, and also when you are overweight or obese. We're also going to be talking about the set point theory. Is it actually real? Is there a weight that your body prefers to stay at? And finally, I'll be giving you a couple of strategies to counteract your body's attempts to get you back to your starting point. All of the information in today's video is backed by scientific research, and if you're interested in reading some of the sources for yourself, all of them will be linked down in the description box below. Without further ado, let's get right into the video. First, I want to apologize for being away for a month or so, but September has really ran me through. However, I promise that I'll be as regular as I used to be from this video on. To begin with, what is the set point theory? The main concept behind this is that your body works kind of like a thermostat, which fights to maintain the temperature that you have set it to be. And any deviations from that are not very welcomed by your biological system. Any significant deviation would lead to adjustments in your hormones, in your metabolism, and also your energy expenditure that could lead to weight rebound. Let's look into some of the factors that could play a role in your body's set point, if there is one. Again, this is a theory and there is some controversy around it, but I think it is very worth mentioning. I turned off the light because we get a very bad reflection in the whiteboard, so you're going to suffer from a bit of a less good lighting for a few minutes. Here we have all of the set point factors that could influence it to go either upwards or downwards. The set point is better described as a settling point, actually, because it does not have to stay the same number throughout your entire lifetime, and there are a lot of factors that could impact it to go up, and in very rare cases to go down. You need to take into account the fact that our bodies, for most of the humans' existence, have been going through periods of time where they were experiencing the lack of sufficient amounts of food, such as war, famine, times of disease, and all of those things. And it is only in the last century, or let's say even in the last few decades, that we are experiencing this obesity problem. There was not really an obesity epidemic 100 years ago, and our bodies have not, at least yet, adapted to this new environment that we live in. Anyways, we're going to be discussing now at first genetics. There are some genetic factors when we're talking about one's set point, and most important here to mention is that it is inherited. So if your parents are overweight or obese, then there is a very high chance, if you're put in the same environment and they suffer from one of the other two things that I'm about to mention, that you're also going to be overweight or obese in that environment. It is not guaranteed, but there is a high likelihood. We have monogenic and polygenic obesity. Monogenic refers to one genetic mutation that favors obesity. Such a mutation would be, for instance, the one that causes leptin resistance. And the second is more common, polygenic obesity, including multiple specific gene variations that favor one becoming obese. I realized that I forgot to talk about another rare but still worth mentioning genetic disorder. This is the so-called congenital leptin deficiency disorder, and it is again due to a very specific genetic variation where the gene that codes for leptin production is different, which leads to the body not producing leptin at all. This condition, however, can be identified very early on in life because the infant lacks any type of satiety signals, and usually this results in very rapid weight gain, but it can be treated with administration of the hormone leptin then to the individual, which results in improved hunger and appetite regulation and also in weight loss. However, the inborn leptin resistance, which is due to a different variation of the gene that codes for the leptin receptor, very similarly to the diet-induced leptin resistance, is quite a different problem because leptin does circulate in the body, but its signal is not being effectively translated to the brain. Epigenetics, if you do not know what this is the science behind how the environment, nutrition, exercise, but also pollution, sedentary lifestyles, etc., how all of this can influence our genes. This cannot directly influence our gene sequence, so the combinations of the different bases and all of that, it does not change that. All of these factors can positively or negatively modify our genes. Here you have a non-modified DNA, the normal DNA, let's say, and it can be positively or negatively impacted by having the so-called methyl groups attached to it, which modifies then the sequence, not changing its original contents, but through these attachments everywhere. Moving on, here we have the obesogenic environment. I'm pretty sure you've heard of this concept if you've been following this channel. This term means that these specific factors listed here favor one becoming overweight or obese. Starting off with the calorie abundance, I already explained to you that for most of the time that humans have been on this planet, we have been living in conditions of scarcity and not in calorie abundance. Therefore, logically, now that we have this abundance of food and calories, our bodies are not adapted to that and they are wired to preserve energy. A sedentary lifestyle is a big one, a very low caloric expenditure, especially if you have an office job, a home office job even. The positive feedback loop, here what the researchers refer to is that if you are obese to the point where this starts impairing your physical activity, your daily movements, your ability to exercise, then that could lead to you becoming even more sedentary and even more overweight or obese. Additionally, if one is experiencing at the same time psychological stress because they're overweight or obese, this could lead to comfort eating and then becoming more overweight or obese. It is a very devilish cycle. And lastly, you have the socioeconomic factors, which refers to the limited access to healthy foods and also the lack of access to recreational areas. Here we also have a short list of medical conditions that could be influencing one's set point. This can go both ways, either up or down. When you're talking about endocrinological disorders, there are some conditions of hormonal imbalance such as PCOS, which then favors one gaining weight, and there are also some other thyroid issues such as the hyperactivity of the thyroid gland, which could lead to one losing weight. So you see how this can go both ways. Same goes also for the gastrointestinal and the eating disorders. Obviously, this is a neuropsychological disorder, but still it is very worth mentioning since, of course, it's directly related to eating. Also, interventions. Here we have factors that could potentially lower one's set points. First, we have bariatric surgery, which, if you're not familiar with it, is the surgical intervention when a part of the stomach is being cut out in attempts to reduce the amount of food that one's ingesting, and then also a series of positive alterations in one's hunger and appetite hormones follow, which is the very positive thing about it. The rates of people that maintain their weight loss after bariatric surgery are very good. They're not 100% again, but still very positive results. Here we also have pharmacotherapy. This would include weight loss drugs such as, for instance, Ozempic or Wegovy or all of those GLP-1 agonists. And here I have a question mark because research is still ongoing. Some studies suggest that after cessation of the treatment, the weight is regained drastically. I think it's mostly dependent on how do you exactly handle the process of this pharmacotherapy, and do you also practice some other things besides just taking the medication. This will probably be the next video. I actually like this lighting. I think I might keep it. I might not turn the ring light back on. The first body of research, and also one of the biggest bodies of research that supports the set point theory concept, is actually the Minnesota Starvation experiment that was performed between the years of 1944 and 1945, which is around the time that the Second World War was ending. And this was actually very much in the theme of world wars and conditions of famine and restricted amounts of foods, because the researchers wanted to investigate how severe caloric restriction impacts people and how can they better approach getting these people back to their normal lives and reintroducing them to normal conditions, what kinds of therapies they should develop. They gathered a very large group of only male participants. Unfortunately, at the time people were not very much into including women in the experiments, but that's another topic. These men were not overweight or obese, they were at a healthy weight. Their daily calories were cut in half, and they were consuming about 1,500 calories for an extended period of time, around 6 months. This is the so-called starvation period. At the end of this starvation period, it was documented that these men were experiencing severe psychological impacts of the treatment as well as physiological impacts. At the time, there were no DEXA scans, so people could not really measure resting energy expenditure. What was observed was a decline in the body temperature, respiration, and heart rate, which all suggests that their basal metabolic rate had significantly declined. At the same time, they were experiencing severe emotional distress, and they were all now preoccupied with thoughts of foods. They were collecting cookbooks and were basically obsessed with the idea of food all of the time, very similarly to the experience of somebody that has developed an eating disorder. After these 6 months, the so-called recovery period started, where the participants were being handled by mental health and also nutrition experts, and they were put on a specific regime to introduce them slowly back into a normal caloric intake. And what happened is that all of them regained a significant amount of weight that they have lost. I also forgot to mention that after the 6 months period, they had all lost around 25% of their body weight, which is a very drastic weight loss for a 6-month period, especially for somebody that is at a healthy weight to begin with. A part of these participants were also allowed to consume as much food as they wanted for a certain period of time. This small group of participants actually overshot the weight that they had started with. So not only did they regain this 25%, they gained even more than that. So you see how our bodies are really doing their best to fight back and restore everything that they have lost. Now we're moving into the hormonal orchestra that is happening every day in our bodies and how it changes when we try to lose weight and also when we gain weight. We have a lot of chemical messengers that signal to our brain whether we should eat or we should stop eating, but for today we're going to focus on two main players here. Leptin is one of the main satiety hormones. It is the hormone that signals to our body, it signals to our brain that we are in a state of energy abundance and we do not have to be consuming any more foods. It is secreted by the fat cells in our body. Therefore, the more fat cells we have, technically we should be secreting more leptin. However, this is not only dependent entirely on the fat cells, since some studies that investigate the impact of overfeeding for a short period of time have also found that leptin increases after these periods, irrespective of the fat gained in that process. Therefore, we generally have some circulating levels of leptin in our body, depending on the amounts of fat that we have, but also before ingesting a meal, our leptin levels would be lower, and after eating something, they would be higher. Ghrelin is the main hormone that drives the opposite effect, therefore hunger, meal initiation. It is being secreted in the stomach and it signals to us, depending on the amount of calories that we have consumed today, when should we have our next meal. Before a meal it would be higher logically, and after we eat something ghrelin levels would go down. There are other satiety hormones such as peptide YI, cholecystokinin, also GLP-1, but for the purpose of today's video we're discussing only these two. When you try to lose weight and restrict your energy intake, your body launches an instant counter-attack against your efforts. And its first weapon is the hormonal changes that occur. These changes, however, are not temporary, and research suggests that this is more of a permanent biological adaptation, and after losing a significant amount of weight, these hormonal levels do not really return to baseline. There was this larger study that involved 50 participants. Unfortunately, only 34 out of them completed the program, and they were first put for 10 weeks on a very low caloric diet. They lost a significant amount of weight, around 14% of their body weight. And after the 10-week program, they were counseled by nutritionists, receiving an adapted nutritional program that they should follow for the remaining 52 weeks. And this meal plan that they received was adjusted for their new basal metabolic rate. The participants regained not all of the weight, although they were put on a meal plan that was technically tailored to their basal metabolic rate. They still regained around half of the weight that they had lost. Not all of it, but still this is a significant amount. The hormonal changes that occurred at week 10 persisted. Their ghrelin levels, their hunger levels, never really returned to baseline. They were still higher than at the beginning of the intervention. Their leptin levels were not measured, but other gut hormones that signal satiety, such as peptide YY and cholecystokinin, were measured. Their levels were not as high as they were at the beginning of the intervention. The subjective appetite was also highly increased. They were still experiencing much higher hunger than they were at the beginning of the intervention. At the same time, I'm pretty sure you've heard of me talking about adaptive thermogenesis on this channel. This refers to the phenomenon where our body's metabolism tends to slow down if we are put especially in a very severe caloric deficit in order to try and preserve all of the energy that we give it. Research has shown that after a significant weight loss, around 15% of one's body weight, the basal metabolic rate adapts with up to a 25% decline, which is much larger, around 10 to 15% larger than the predicted decline in the basal metabolic rate. I say predicted because logically when you lose weight, you have less of a body mass that requires energy. Your basal metabolic rate is of course going to decline naturally due to the lesser weight that you're carrying. This all raises the question, if the system of regulating our hunger and appetite is indeed so smart, why are we suffering from an obesity epidemic? Why do our bodies not signal to our brain effectively that we should stop eating? What happens when one is put in a caloric surplus for a longer period of time due to the high abundance of very highly palatable, highly attractive, ultra-processed foods that favor one consuming more and more of them? Our system does indeed continue producing leptin according to the amount of fat that we're gaining, but our brain cannot really deal with this high amount of leptin, which leads to leptin resistance, which is very commonly observed in overweight and obese people. Our receptors become in some way less sensitive to this hormone. You can say that the wire between our receptors and then the brain is cut, and the signal that they are trying to transfer does not successfully reach the brain to signal us to stop eating. So there is an abundance of leptin in our body, but it does not exert its function successfully. Ghrelin levels are actually lower, so they are not higher in obese people, which raises the question whether the leptin resistance plays a big role in not regulating appetite properly, or are the psychological factors regarding comfort eating and etc. more important in this case? We don't know really. The good news is that leptin resistance might be reversible. There were some studies done on rodents, so they were done in mice, that first were fed a very high fat, high calorie density diet that led to them becoming obese. After they were put on a normal diet and they lost weight, their leptin resistance was indeed reversed. So we have some indications that this could not be a permanent damage to our body. We could be able to do something about it. All of this suggests that our body is in a state of very dynamic biological adaptation adaptation to everything that we're doing to it. And the system is very hard to outsmart, unfortunately for us, when we're trying to lose weight. I hope that all of this information influences your opinion on people who say that they're actively trying to lose weight, but they find it hard to maintain the weight loss because they technically have it a lot worse, even physiologically wise, than somebody who is at a healthy weight, especially if they have never been overweight. They are never going to suffer these negative hormonal adaptations that overweight or obese people suffer when they try to improve their health. Finally, the thing that you've been waiting for. What are some strategies that you can use to combat all of these negative hormonal adaptations in your body? The first big one is not to be in a severe caloric deficit, mostly because of the very quick metabolic adaptation that happens once you put your body in this very restricted state. I encourage you highly to watch my metabolism video for this, but basically your body adapts very quickly and irrespective of the weight that you have lost when you put it in a severe caloric restriction. When you are consuming, let's say, half of your daily calories that you consumed prior to that, then there is a very high chance that you wouldn't be eating a sufficient amount of nutrients and especially protein. And protein is very important for preserving one's muscle mass. This leads me to the second point. Eating enough protein and preserving your muscle mass is crucial for countering all of these negative changes that occur in your body when you are trying to lose weight. Negative in the terms of you're getting really hungry and your metabolism slows down. Most of the changes that happen when you lose weight, if you're at an unhealthy weight before, are on the positive side. If you're in a severe caloric deficit, you do not eat enough protein and you do not engage in any type of resistance training, the chances are you're going to lose significant amounts of muscle mass along with the fat. And muscle mass is the main predeterminant for a higher basal metabolic rate and a better metabolism long term. This is very important for long-term weight loss maintenance, and a preserved muscle mass makes it easier for you to maintain that weight and not regain all of the weight back as soon as you decide that you do not want to pay that much attention to nutrition. The third aspect here is to know what works best for you and your mental needs regarding nutrition. Here I'm talking about if you're a person that requires bigger portions in terms of being visually satisfied with the food that you're receiving. At the same time, this could also help with the expansion of your stomach when you're consuming bigger portions, which gives your brain a signal to stop eating. And this could be achieved through low calorie density but high volume foods such as fruits and vegetables. An easy way to go about this would be to keep half of your plate full with fruits and vegetables and the other half can be with carbs and protein and, I don't know, a spoonful of fats. This is a portion control method that has been very popular for a very long period of time. There are even portion control plates that you can purchase online. However, this is kind of a guideline that you can implement. You do not have to implement it if you do not think that high volume foods would help you. Of course, not everybody's gut handles all fruits and veggies that well, so again, this might not work perfectly for everyone. If you prefer to do portion control in a different way, then that's up to you, as long as you're nourished enough and you're eating sufficient amounts of food. Do what works best for you. On a final note, if you have a very long and negative history with restrictive dieting, you experience some extreme hunger, you never feel satiated, and you suspect that there might be another issue going on, I highly recommend you that you go and get your hormonal levels checked, because there might be another issue happening in your body, and that could lead to all of these small changes not really working for you. Thank you so much for being here with me today. I hope you enjoyed the contents of today's video. If you did, do not forget to like and subscribe to the channel so you do not miss anything new from me. If you have a topic that you would like me to discuss next time, feel free to leave it down in the comments below. My next video is probably to also be satiety related and GLP-1 related, but if you have something else in mind, please let me know. Thank you again for watching, and I will see you in the next one.